Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a time in every man's life, every woman's life, where the morning breaks not with comfort but with calling. And I say to you this day, get up and grind. You were not made to coast through life, to live half awake, to shuffle through your days like a shadow of your true self. No, you were created with purpose, and purpose demands motion. Purpose demands fire in your bones. Purpose demands that when the alarm rings and the world is still asleep, you rise. You say, I'm tired. I say to you, grind anyway. You say, no one sees my effort. I say to you, grind anyway. Because the grind, that sacred silent grind is where destinies are shaped. There is no greatness without grit, no harvest without sweat. You can pray for rain, yes, but you better be planting seeds. Some want miracles, but they don't want mornings. They want glory, but skip the grind. Let me tell you, that's not how victory is won. Friends, hear me. Discipline is holy. To show up when you don't feel like it, to push when everything says stop, that is a sermon louder than words. And in your grind, you preach. You declare to the darkness, I may be down, but I'm not out. You declare to doubt, you don't get the final word. You declare to your past, you don't define me. Each early morning, each quiet sacrifice, each repetition when no one's watching, that is worship, that is legacy. That is how battles are won before the sun even rises. You don't need perfect conditions. You don't need applause. You don't need to feel strong. You just need to move. Get up and grind. Trust that the one who gave you this day will meet you in it. He is with you in the routine and the repetition, the resistance. You keep walking, you keep working, you keep believing, you keep believing. And one day, yes, one day, those tears will turn to triumph. That struggle will become your story. That daily grind will become eternal glory. So I say again to every weary soul, every dreamer, every fighter, one, there comes a moment often quiet and unannounced when the soul stirs before the body moves, when the weight of untapped potential presses heavier than the blanket you hide beneath. And though the sun has not yet broken through the window, something deeper calls you out of slumber, out of silence, because this life, your life, is not a story meant to be written in the comfort of dreams, but in the grind of daylight where purpose is forged, not found. 2, you were not born for the backseat of history, not formed in the secret places of the earth to become a shadow of someone else's voice, not crafted by divine hands to watch the clock tick by as though time owes you mercy. But you were made from bed. To rise, not just 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 from bed, but from delay. From excuses dressed as logic and fear disguised as planning. Because the truth is this: the call to rise is not a whisper, it's a roar you've learned. Lorene. And when that call comes, you don't negotiate with it. Don't ask it to come back at a more convenient hour. Don't tell it you're too tired, too busy, too broken. Because that's the lie that's been sung to your soul for too long, a lullaby of hesitation. Hesitation is the cradle, and hesitation is the cradle of 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 regret. And so you must rise now, even if your legs tremble, even if your hands shake, even if your vision is blurry from yesterday's failures, because forward is still forward, even when it doesn't feel like triumph. 4, there's a sacredness to the moment your feet hit the floor, when the world is still asleep, and yet heaven watches to see if you will choose comfort or calling, ease or excellence, mediocrity or meaning, and you must understand that every rising is resistance. Every step toward effort is a rebellion against the inertia of the ordinary, because the call to rise isn't about chasing success. It's about answering divine design that whispers, I made you for more. 5. And I tell you, the world may not cheer when you get up, may not notice your grind, may never applaud your effort, but your rising is not a performance. It is warfare. It is worship. It is a declaration that you will not die with your fire still unlit, that you will not go quietly into a life of comfort and compromise, because within your chest beats the echo of every ancestor who dreamed of what you now stand on, and they are watching to see what you'll do with this dawn. 6, you rise not because it's easy, not because it's natural, but because staying down costs more than the pain of standing up, because every excuse robs your future of its voice, and every delay dims the light of what you could become. And while others may wait for perfect conditions, for motivation to fall like rain, for everything to align before they move, you must rise now while the soil is still hard, while the sky is still gray, while the grind still hurts, because this is where champions are called. 7, so rise with the weight still on your shoulders, rise with questions still unanswered, rise with wounds still healing and scars still fresh, because it is not the flawless who lead the charge, but the faithful. Not the perfect who change the world, but the persistent. And if all you have today is a will to try, then rise with that. Let that be your offering. Let that be your anthem. And do not stop until the very ground beneath you believes you were born to walk. 8, and when you rise, rise again and again until your rising becomes your rhythm. Your rhythm becomes your reputation becomes your roar, and your roar becomes the sound that wakes others from their sleep. Someone somewhere is waiting to rise too, but they're waiting to see if you will go first. Desire is loud, fleeting, full of fire, but lacking roots, showing up like a spark in the night that promises warmth but disappears with the first breeze. And if you build your life on desire alone, you will burn quick and fall hard, because desire is the dreamer's drug, but discipline is the architect's hammer, steady, slow, unfailing, not concerned with how you feel, but with who you're becoming. 2, discipline is the voice that doesn't change when the weather does, doesn't flinch when the mood drops, doesn't ask permission from your emotions to move forward, and while desire might get you to the gym, to the desk, to the grind once, it's discipline that brings you back when the motivation is gone, when the thrill fades, when no one's watching and your own flesh tells you it's okay to take the day off. Because let me tell you, desire will lie to you, make promises it never intends to keep, tell you that greatness will be convenient, that excellence will be effortless, that dreams can be chased in comfort. But discipline looks you in the eyes and says that this will hurt, this will cost you, this will take everything, and then hands you a mirror and says, but this is the version of you who's worth it. 4, and when the feelings fail, as they always do, and the excitement wears off, as it always will, and the novelty becomes normal and the fire becomes flicker, you will either fall back on excuses or rise on commitment. because those who build their lives on discipline don't wait to feel ready. They act in spite of resistance, in defiance of fatigue, and obedience to purpose, because discipline isn't sexy, but it is sacred. 5, you will be tempted to choose what's easy over what's eternal, what feels good now over what lasts forever, to scroll instead of study, to sleep instead of stretch, to procrastinate instead of prepare. But every time you choose discipline, you are casting a vote for your future self and all. And the ballots are counted not in moments of inspiration, but in the trenches of routine. 6, the ones who rise, the ones who endure, the ones whose names echo beyond their years are not those who felt the most passion, but those who endured the most pressure without folding. Those who stared down distractions and said, not today. Who felt the pull of pleasure but chose the path of pain because they saw the prize on the other side, and while desire flinched at discomfort, discipline stood still and stayed. So when the morning comes and the bed calls you back, when your body says no, and your purpose says yes, when the fire is gone and only the ashes remain, that's where discipline takes over. That's where character is carved. That's where kings are forged. Because discipline doesn't rely on feeling, it relies on vision, sees through the fog of fatigue into the land of fulfillment. 8, and if you ever wonder who you really are, don't look at what you do when you're inspired. Look at what you do when you're empty. Look at what happens when desire dies and the room is quiet and no one claps and no one posts about your effort, and it's just you and the choice to show up anyway. Because discipline is the daily death of the lesser man in you and the daily resurrection of the one you were born to become. 1, there is a holy hush in the early hours before the world wakes, when your feet touch the floor, not out of habit, but out of hunger. When the grind begins and no one sees you, no one claps for you, no one thanks you, but something eternal leans in, because there is grace in the grind. Not the kind that floats in the clouds, but the kind that bleeds through calloused hands and tired bones and unseen faithfulness. 2, we think of grace as gentle, soft, ethereal, floating down like petals. But the truest grace is gritty, showing up in the repetition, in the early morning muscle memory, and the 5th rejection letter that doesn't break you. In the 7th try that still doesn't work, but you show up for the 8th anyway, because grace doesn't always lift you out of the grind. It empowers you through it. 3, and you must understand there is no grind without weight, without resistance, without weariness that whispers, I quit. But grace whispers louder, continue, and not because you feel strong, not because you're unshakable, but because grace is not permission to escape the pressure. It is the presence that walks with you through it, gives you breath when you're gasping, gives you strength when your strength is. 4, Sue may not see it, but every task done with integrity, every sacrifice done in silence, every moment you choose faithfulness over fame, focus over comfort, commitment over convenience, is saturated in grace, because grace is not merely for sinners. It is for grinders, for builders, for tired visionaries who keep planting when the field looks barren and keep believing when nothing yet blooms. 5, there is grace in every repetition you think doesn't count, in every hour you think doesn't matter, in every delay that tests your trust, because the grind isn't just about what you're building, it's about who you're becoming, and grace isn't just a cushion to catch you when you fall. It's the power to rise before you fall, the oil in the engine that no one sees but everyone hears when your life starts to roar. 6, the world may celebrate the highlight, the finished product, the breakthrough, but grace is in the process, in the lunch break spent dreaming, in the late nights spent writing, and the setbacks that teach you to stand. And if you only look for grace in the outcome, you'll miss the miracle of its presence in every ounce of pressure that didn't crush you. And I tell you this, when the weight feels too much, when the grind wears you down to the bone, when your own voice grows tired of the pep talks and the playlists and the promises, listen for the stillness, because grace often speaks in the pauses, in the breaths between breakdown and breakthrough. And it will tell you that you are not working alone, you are not building alone, you are not bleeding alone. 8, so grind, not just with effort, but with reverence. Grind, knowing your tears are not wasted and your weakness is not failure. Grind with joy. Not because the work is easy, but because the grace is enough. And when they ask how you made, how you kept going, how you stood through the storm, tell them it was never just strength. It was grace in the grind, silent but sure, invisible but indestructible, always present, always pushing, always. Do not despise the day of small beginnings, for in the silence of obscurity, in the forgotten corners where no spotlight shines, where no one claps and no crowd gathers, that is where the foundation is laid, that is where the roots grow deep. That is where the roots grow deep. That is where heaven. And though it may look like nothing to others, every great move of history started as a whisper Seed, a small act of faith in soil no one believed would believe. 2, you must understand that greatness rarely announces itself with fanfare, rarely starts in arenas or on stages or in front of followers, but is born in back rooms and basements and borrowed spaces where your only audience is your own doubt and your only cheerleaders are still. Small voice that keeps saying, keep going when logic says give up, because the beginning will always look too small to matter until it grows too powerful to ignore. 3, for waiting for conditions to be perfect, for resources to line up, for the feeling to strike, you'll be waiting forever, because the power is not in the size of the start, but in the courage to start at all, in taking one step when you don't know the second. In writing the first line when the book seems too long, and doing what you can with what you have where you are, because heaven breathes on effort, not on excuses. 4, there is something holy about humble beginnings, something divine about dusty floors and borrowed tools and late nights where no one sees the work. Because every time you show up anyway, every time you choose consistency over applause, every time you build without validation, you declare to the universe that you believe in the process more than the praise and the purpose more than the platform. 5, small beginnings are sacred, not because they're comfortable, but because they train you in the dark, what you'll need in the light. Because if you learn how to lead when no one's watching, how to persevere when no one's helping, how to stay faithful when nothing feels fruitful, then when the increase comes, when the doors open, when the name grows, your character won't collapse under the weight of the very thing you prayed. You are not behind just because you are small. You are not failing just because the fruit hasn't appeared, because all of creation testifies that the seed must be buried before it breaks. The root must stretch downward before the tree rises upward. And your beginning might be quiet, unseen, but slow is not stuck, small is not insignificant, hidden is not forgotten. And if you could only see what's being built beneath the surface, what's forming while you're frustrated, what's maturing while you're questioning, you would not curse the small, you would bless it. Because God does not waste beginnings, He multiplies them. He breathes on them until what once looked like nothing becomes the very thing that shifts everything. So start with the stone in your hand, the word in your heart, the dream that won't let you sleep, and don't measure its worth by its size, but by its obedience, by its faith, by its endurance, because there is more power in one small beginning surrendered to purpose than in 1,000 grand gestures driven by pride. And if you build well in the small, you will stand strong in the great. 1, there will come a moment, not once, but again and again, when your strength will fail, when your plans will fall flat, when the door won't open no matter how hard you knock. And it's in that moment you will find out what you've really been standing on. Because talent will tremble and logic will break and motivation will go missing, but faith will whisper, I keep swinging when your fists are bruised and your knees are bloody. 2, faith is not a feeling you wait for, not a breeze that comes when the conditions are right, not a shallow hope that everything will just magically work out, but it is the fire inside that says, even if it doesn't, I won't stop, the anchor that holds when the waves rise. The grip that tightens when your own hands go numb, and if you've ever truly fought for something, truly wept and warred and wondered, then you know that faith isn't soft, it's a weapon. 3, because the fight isn't just physical, it's mental, emotional, spiritual. No one sees the voices that tell you to quit, the fears that knock loud at night, and in that invisible war, when discipline has done all it can, when desire is dried up, when support has gone silent, it is faith that rises from within and says, you didn't come this far to stop me. And you must understand that faith is not the denial of reality. It is defiance in the face of it. It looks dead dreams in the eye and says, I get up. It walks into fire believing in rain. It digs ditches when there's no cloud in the sky. It prepares for victory when you haven't yet won a single round, because faith doesn't wait for proof to move. It moves until proof follows. 5, faith is the substance, not the suggestion of things hoped for. It is the evidence, not the estimation of things not seen. And when you fight with faith, you tap into a strength not your own. You are carried by something eternal, something unshakable, something that sees beyond the fog of your fatigue and reminds you that purpose is greater than pain, that calling is louder than comfort, that heaven still has your back, even when earth feels heavy. 6, and there will be days when you don't feel brave, when your hands tremble as you lift the sword again, when your prayers are whispered through clenched teeth and tired tears. But that's when faith is its deepest work. Not when you're winning, but when you're worn. Not when you're worn, not when you feel strong, but when you're barely standing and still you stand. 11, So don't let the silence fool you. Don't let the delay defeat you. Don't let the resistance convince you that you're losing, because faith doesn't measure progress the way the world does. It doesn't look for applause or outcomes or statistics. It looks for consistency, for obedience, for grit. For a heart that says, even if I don't see the promise yet, I'll still walk like it's mine. 8. And when the fight is long, when the wounds are deep, when the victory still seems far off, and every logical reason says, oh, let go. Let faith rise, let it roar, let it carry you like wings on the wind. Because it was never your strength that was supposed to win this. It was always your faith that was meant to finish it. One victory does not belong to the loudest voice or the flashiest start, or one who burns hot and fast and fades just as quick, but to the one who wakes up day after day and does the thing again, the one who shows up when it's boring, when it's heavy, when it's unnoticed. Because consistency is not glamorous, it's not viral, but it's the road every champion walks and the price every legacy pays. You can have all the talent, all the vision, all the passion in the world, but if you only move when you feel like it, only push when it's easy, only build when it's exciting, then you'll never see the finish line, because feelings fade, hype dies, motivation runs dry. But consistency digs deep and says, I'll go again when again feels like too much. The mountain is not moved by one mighty shove, but by 1,000 small steps. The masterpiece is not painted in one stroke, but in countless unseen touches. The business is not built by a single deal, but by every mundane task you do when no one's watching. And if you ever wonder who wins, look not at who starts first, but who refuses to start. 4. Consistency is the quiet killer of excuses, the steady voice that says, I said I would. Even when your energy says, I don't, even when your emotions scream, quit. The consistency is covenant, not convenient. It is showing up when the mood has left the room, when the applause has faded, when the novelty has worn off and all that's left is the grind and the go. 5. And I tell you, consistency will offend your laziness. It will confront your procrastination. It will ask you to choose your future over your feelings, your purpose over your preference, and it will not let you cheat the process or skip the line or shortcut the struggle. Because consistency is not just what you do, it's who you become in the doing. 6. Victory does not respond to moments, it responds to momentum. And momentum is not magic, it is movement done again and again until the ground beneath your feet shifts and the wall before you cracks and the breakthrough that once felt impossible becomes inevitable. Not because you shouted louder, but because you stayed. 7. It's not about perfection, it's about repetition. It's not about always getting it right. It's about not walking away when it goes wrong. It's about being the kind of person that keeps planting when there's no sign of rain. Keeps showing up when the door is still closed. Keeps grinding when the outcome is still uncertain, because consistency turns effort into evidence. 8. So let the world chase the shortcut, the trend, the instant hit. But use the path that builds slow and deep. Choose the habit over the hype. Choose the discipline that no one sees and the rhythm that no one claps for. Because in the end, it's not the talented, the lucky, or the loud who wear the crown. Victory belongs to the consistent.